The time has finally come. I've heard the request, I've taken it, I've considered it, and I've finally heard it enough. I'm here today to finally show y'all how I finish my 3D prints. I am the unsupervised dork, and I make things like this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And today, I'm here to show you how you can go from this to this, to this, and finally, to something like this. And in the process, hopefully, New Line Cinema does not hose me. Please, thank you. Now, one of the first things that is probably the most satisfying about doing any kind of 3D printing is, first of all, of course, the time lapse that goes along with it. And I will not rob you of that. All right, now that the obligatory time lapse is out of the way, let's talk about one of the more satisfying parts of 3D printing, and that, of course, is the support removal. This is fresh off the bed. This is the very print you just saw a few seconds ago in that time lapse. And one of the best things is just that initial tear of the parts for all of the supports to just pop right out. So clean, quick, easy, and man, the quality on the printers these days, I tell you, over the last couple of years, they have just skyrocketed in their abilities and their availability as well, because they are just everywhere. Now, you have so many different manufacturers to choose from. I'm not going to name names, but I do use one very specifically, and so much so that I've gotten multiple of their machines just to help out with all of my other projects that I'm doing. But no printer is infallible to having some little tweaks and things that you do need to process before you go any further with a print. And you might not be able to see it here in this particular print, but there are a couple of spots here and along the little ridge lines where there's some stuff that needs to be dealt with. It's a little pokey, a little pointy. Same thing right here on the bridge of the eyes. And one of the easiest things that I do, I've just gotten myself a little simple jeweler's file, and I go around the edges here on some of this stuff and just simply file away. And with the quality of this print, this one is something that you really don't have to do a whole lot of post-processing with, especially if you have done your due diligence in putting all of the supports where they need to be. Mostly just around the bridges of the eyes, depending on how, of course, you print this. I do print mine standing straight up, as you would have seen there in the video. It is a little risky because you can run into issues where the adhesion on just this tiny little area that makes contact with the plate, it just ends up letting go, and then you've got yourself a failed print. But I've secured mine enough over the years with this particular one, because I've done this dozens of times and I've given it away to folks as gifts, just mostly because it was such a classic movie. I was talking with a colleague of mine at my day job recently, and we both made the comment that it was something that really, I think, made Cameron Diaz all of a sudden blow up in her stardom. Just being coupled with Jim Carrey, and their chemistry in that movie was absolutely fantastic. Now that this has been taken care of and we've gotten everything sanded where we wanted to at the very least here, because this one you don't really need a whole lot of post-processing initially, as I had mentioned. Just a little bit of filing around the edges to clean up some of those little sharper points that would have been there from the print. And I won't show you this process just because it is a little bit on the tedious side, but what I do to help make the prints pop a little bit more and also take care of the very, very fine layer lines that you see. I do use a 2-in-1 automotive filler and primer that's labeled as sandable. You might have seen other 3D printers use the very same kind of material when it comes down to finishing their prints. I use the exact same thing. Spray it on with a light coat first, give it a good sanding, and then come back through to a heavier coat, sand again, and then wash, rinse, and repeat as many times as you deem necessary. Eventually, you'll come up to a point where you have something more akin to this, where it's a nice clean print all the way around, very, very few layer lines actually still showing, if at all any, here at this point. And some parts I do leave a little bit on the rough side intentionally, only because it does add to the authenticity of the part a little bit. Like this little piece here under the nose, it looks, when you finish it, a little bit more like worn metal if you do it properly. And that's exactly what I'm here to do today, and show you guys how I go through all of my painting. Usually out the gate I do use a black spray paint that's just a regular old primer. Being that it's winter though here and very cold, I don't like spraying inside or going out to dip outside and just do that quick spray. I prefer just to go ahead and go the old-fashioned route and just use some plain black acrylic paint. It's nothing fancy. It's just, you know, a standard thing that you can get at any hobby store. It doesn't really matter the brand, I don't think, personally. I just happened to fall on this one because it's local, it's available, and very, very cheap. I think I pay anywhere from 50 some odd cents to a little less than $1 per bottle. And it's a very easy material to work with. It does just require, in some cases, that you do multiple coats. So here, I'm going to go ahead and just start with the base of how I go through everything. And as you might expect here on a piece like this, it's best to just go ahead and start it off with a simple black base coat. Use a larger brush, just something that's got a big wave to it. That way you can get in there and really work everything down into the cracks on this wooden texture that's across the entire thing. So make sure you get it really in there nice and good. You might need to come through and do a second coat. And with the latter colors, you absolutely will. Painting a 3D print, especially when you're using cheaper acrylics like this, is all about layering and taking your time to go ahead and do so. And I might speed parts of this video up just because it's going to be pretty boring just to sit here and listen to me jabber on about nonsensical garbage, when in fact that you're just here to see how all of this is done. So I'll keep the recording going, but I'm just going to go ahead and speed it up here in a moment so you can see that we get all of this done, get a nice good clear black coat on everything, and I'll come through and even do it a second time before I have any other further commentary here. Don't be afraid in these first couple of coats to go ahead and absolutely just slop it on there. It doesn't need to be pretty, especially for the base coat, but you do want everything to be covered and have very, very few, if at all, any little spots of that light gray tone showing through. Ideally, you want this thing entirely blacked out because it will come up towards the end on how it actually ends up looking. As you saw in the original, like right here, some of that black continues to shine through and adds additional depth. There's even tones of brown in there, and we'll get to that part here as we go. Now I've gotten to the point where I want to go ahead and be able to start continuing to work on other parts, but obviously it's still a little on the wet side. So I'm going to cheat and kind of accelerate the process here just because I don't want to wait and I'm impatient. So I'm just going to use this little heat tool and I'm just going to gently dry this off. One thing to keep in mind while you're using a heat gun like this, or a heat tool, hair dryer, anything that outputs a fair amount of heat towards a 3D print, it's still plastic. It could deform or melt, so be sure not to linger too much in one particular area or another. Keep moving around and make sure you're not sitting in one spot too terribly long. All right, now that this has got a nice black undercoat on every little surface, I've tried to hit all the nooks and crannies as best as I possibly can. Because I've been using the heat gun and not allowing this paint to properly cure, I am going to let this first set of layers sit for just a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to move on to actually applying our colors. Now, I am going to be using the same brand of paint for the colors as well. It's still Apple Barrel. I'm working with matte paints because I intend to put a gloss finish and a little bit of a matte finish on top of that to help kind of even things out. But I'll be using Nutmeg Brown, followed by Kelly Green, and then, just to spice things up a little bit, because one of the iconic scenes in the movie is seeing that little bit of magic shimmer across the back, there is a paint out there. Hopefully you can find it in your area. It's this Delta Creative Ceramicoat Cosmo Glaze. It shifts from violet blue to green within that range. It's got a nice kind of sparkly, almost magical-like appearance to it. And that's what I've applied to the back here on this particular version of the mask, just to have it add that extra little bit of prop realism to it. And I think it honestly looks pretty dope. I've always loved how this comes out in that shine and the sheen, while the front has that little bit of a more matte-like finish. You can still see it's a little on the semi-glossy side, but I really do like the way that this sits because it looks clean and it's going to stay well protected the way that it's been finished. So now we just let this one sit for a couple minutes and then we start coming back for the color.
One eternity later.
All right, now that time has passed enough and we've given this enough of a chance to cure on its first layers and take a look over, it doesn't look too bad. I don't see any white spots sitting out anywhere that would be plainly obvious, or otherwise it's not going to get covered up by other paint here as we go. So I'm going to move on to the next step, but I'm going to use a slightly smaller brush that's a little bit softer than the previous one. And I'm also going to use a method that some people refer to as slap chop brushing, as well as a combination of dry brushing on top of that. And by that, I'm just going to put a little bit of paint here into my dish. And I'll give you a preview of what I mean. And then just like the black, I'll kind of speed through little bits here and there. Whether or not I have a little bit of commentary to add to things. But first, get enough on the brush that it's there, but then blot it out on a little piece of paper towel or something else. Make sure you don't have any other extra little stragglers on there like hairs. And then I like to start from right against the edge of the little nose bridge here. And I kind of dot along the taller edges here of the print. And then when I've run out enough of paint and gotten slightly dry enough, I come through and then I kind of just use the full flat edge of the brush to pull things over. That way, as I go, I am skipping over these deeper valleys as I go. Sometimes you can use a larger brush for this as well. And I just kind of give this almost, again, slap brush or dry brush-like aspect to it. And it's going to look a little messy at first. And that's kind of the intent. It's meant to be a little bit more organic as you go. And you are going to have to layer this to get something to show through. And don't be too mad at yourself if you let a little bit of brown dig down into those little crevices, because that's actually going to add a little bit to the print here later on down the road. But one of the key things you'll notice is that I'm actually going against the grain with the paint. So as these lines are coming down vertically, I'm only painting horizontally against them so that the brush will skip over those deeper valleys, but still give that opportunity for a little bit to fall down in there. And then you can kind of just keep going through that same motion. Just make sure you don't have a ton of paint on your brush. Otherwise, you will end up in situations where too much gets into the print, and then you have it kind of seep down into these valleys or these gaps, and it's kind of detaches or takes away from the print here a little bit. So just carefully, but almost sloppily at the same time. Controlled chaos, if you were. And don't worry if you get anything up here on the bridge of the nose, because that's going to be something that later on I'm going to come back and clean up. And then we'll use a different material other than just regular acrylic paint to finish the bridge of the nose, so that it has this more, again, antique-y silver look to it like this one does. I will have to apologize for bringing it out of frame so often. It's my first video. Please cut me some slack. I'll get better. I'm just working on it and throwing this all together because honestly, again, I'm sick of people asking me, so here it is. I'm thinking that's actually looking pretty good here at this point. I'm going to stick with this level of brown because I like it to be a little bit darker and have it show through. It does appear to be more old, like worn, waterlogged wood. So yeah, let's move on to the next one, which will be the Kelly green here. Now this is where this particular print really starts to come together when we start adding the green into this. So this is the fun part where you actually start to see a lot of your work start to pay off in terms of how it ends up to start appearing here. So just like before, and you'll notice while I was doing all of the brown, I was holding the brush at a very steep angle to the print so that I could ensure, again, these valleys and these little crevices were skipped over so that it has that more natural looking appearance to it. And I'll continue to do the same thing here with the green. I'm fairly satisfied with how this part of it has turned out so far. I've got a nice even coat of green on there. You can see there's still hints of brown peeking through, the areas of the deeper valleys being black and everything in there. But as you might notice here along the bridge of the nose, a lot of paint's gotten on there, might have even gotten a little bit on the top there, and that's the next step. I'm going to go ahead and clean that up, and then I'm going to be applying this material right here. This is called Rub and Buff. It's more of a wax-like material than it is a paint, but it's meant to give more of that pewter, silver, kind of an antique-y look to things. And you'll see that here in a few moments as I go to apply it and go from there. Alright, as you can see, this rub and buff is very much like a paste, and it goes on just as well as paint does, but you do want to use something like a foam brush applicator, very similar to this, or your finger, whichever you prefer. I prefer the foam brush applicator because then I can be a little bit more ginger and add that extra little bit of just distance between certain things. And as you can see, you really don't need all that much. And hopefully, if I tear my tape away, I let the paint sit long enough that I should be able to just go like this. And there you have it. For right now, I'll skip the application of this Ceramicoat Cosmo glaze that I had mentioned earlier, but just do know that you will get a very similar shine and sheen to what you see here on this. It's very inexpensive. You can find it at most craft stores. I found it at my local Walmart. Very easy to access. But that's the pretty much the gist of it. The only other thing that I would finish up with is a clear enamel clear coat on this, followed by a matte finish so that it is not a super high gloss finish, and then you have this very nice looking piece here to work off of.